Welcome to the first episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Curry, and we got my friend, my boy, my partner in crime, Dr. John Devereaux.
Yeah, man, I'm glad that we're finally able to get this podcast, off the ground. We've been talking about doing this for a little bit over a year now. And before we go any further, I think the first thing that we need to do is really break down the title of the podcast for our listeners who might be a little unaware. So I know that you have the moniker of the Wolf. So can you explain to the listeners and the viewers what that title really means?
Absolutely. Well, for me, in my profession, I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I'm a realtor by trade. I invest. I'm a serial entrepreneur. But it really comes from the Wolf's mentality, right? They're strategic, patient, quiet, and they understand the value of teamwork. And those are some of the things that I value in my own life. So I kind of took on that, if you will, that persona of a wolf, right? But for most people, just by saying the wolf, you wouldn't understand what that means until I tell you.
Right.
But for you, being a doctor, obviously you don't operate on people. But can you tell our listeners, how you got that name?
Yeah, just from the degree that I've attained. So I do have my bachelor's of business in economics. My master's degree is in economics, and I have a doctorate of education degree. I'm an educator. I've been an educator for the past 6 years. So that's where my title, Dr. Devereaux, comes from. That's how my students address me. And what I really like about this podcast is, you decided to go the entrepreneur route. Whereas, I decided to go through the education and I work a traditional, 9-to-5 job. But I think this podcast is going to be able to really, highlight the different paths to success and allow our listeners and our viewers to kind of learn from other successful entrepreneurs like yourself that we're going to have on the podcast. And then also other professionals that we're going to have on the podcast that are working in maybe like the traditional corporate setting. And like a lot of the people that we're going to have on from all these different industries are going to be able to drop so much knowledge for our listeners and our viewers. And I'm excited, to engage in those conversations, as I'm sure you are as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, for every podcast that we'll have, we'll always start off with one of the quotes. And the first quote is to allow your passion to become your purpose, and it'll one day become your profession. So, Glenn, when you hear that quote, what does that really mean to you, or how would you apply that as an entrepreneur?
I think my passion has always been real estate, especially growing up. I grew up with my grandmother, and, I kind of watched her go through the whole foreclosure incident and losing her home. So my passion has always lied from trying to understand how real estate worked. And I think as I got older, I started diving into that field. And became a realtor, started investing in things like that. So eventually it did become my profession. I was passionate about it, passionate about helping people, passionate about not ever being in that situation, or, the people around me being in that situation. But what about you, John? When you think about that quote, is that something that you yourself kind of deal with in your everyday life?
I think so. I think everybody has this idea of what they want to be when they grow up. And I can honestly say that I never saw myself in the profession that I'm currently in. Like for me personally, I hate public speaking. So, being a professor and talking in front of, 30 plus students, is just something I never really envisioned for myself. However, I think that passion does develop over time, and I can see myself kind of getting on that path earlier on. I know when I first started at the community college that I attended, I was a tutor, and I used to tutor students in math, and I really enjoyed that. And I got a lot of, internal gratification from helping those students who hated that subject to be able to, thrive in it and be successful. And the same thing happened when I was in my master's program. I was a graduate tutor. So I would tutor students in economics and in math and even some sciences. And once again, I started to feel that internal gratification, that intrinsic value that I generated from helping students to recognize their potential in certain fields. So naturally, I started to see that I was gravitating towards wanting to work with students. And luckily, I was just around a lot of people, at the college that I was attending, who were very passionate professors and, really just kind of spoke that into me, like that is a viable option for you. So I do honestly believe, like, when you find something that you're passionate about, then you are able to turn that into your profession. Like, I think honestly, if I hit the lottery, today, I would still be teaching because I really do
Yeah.
enjoy what I do. And there's this quote that I heard, and I'm pretty sure you probably heard it as well, said like, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Like, we both want to be successful, but if you're not fulfilled in the job that you do, then really what are you really gaining from it? And I know that you get that same fulfillment out of real estate and those, transactions that you do. So how did you even get on the path to becoming a realtor and that serial investor?
I think that for me, at least, mine's kind of stemmed from my father, right? My father has always been an entrepreneur. Means for as long as I can remember, he had barber shops, he had beauty shops, restaurants, you name it. So that entrepreneur type of influence has always been in my life. Most of my cousins are entrepreneurs as well. My cousins, my dad's side, my mom's side, all have businesses. So for me, working in 9 to 5 never really made sense. So as I got older, I always tried to look for ways in which I can kind of make money and build a business. I was doing financial advising for a minute, but the real estate is what really kind of captivated me. And for me, being a realtor kind of made sense. I love luxury homes, and I always wanted to, show people luxury homes and, kind of help them to find, their dream homes, and also investing in real estate. I'm a firm believer that, there's always going to be more land than there is people to fill that land. So for me, it always made sense, and there was always a vehicle to ultimately reach that success in my head of, being successful, being a millionaire. So, for me, the path has always been there. It's always been laid out. It's just about, kind of going after it. And real estate just always made sense for me. But when you think about your path and, you obviously took the education route most people take, right? How was that for you? Has that always been the path that you wanted to take?
No, and to be completely honest, I didn't even really plan on attending college. I was originally going to become a real estate appraiser. I had took the classes and everything. Like, I didn't start college, my first year of college, until I was 21, honestly. And this was after being denied, admittance to the college that I wanted to go to. So
Wow.
I applied to WIU. When I was, like I said, 21, I took 3 years off after high school, and they sent me a rejection letter. And the reason why is because I didn't really take schooling seriously in high school. So that reflected in the grades that I received. So if I would have went like right after I graduated high school, then I probably could have got in on like academic probation or something like that. But with them denying me, it was honestly probably one of the best things that could have happened to me, because it forced me to, go the community college route, which was probably better for me as I, kind of look back. A lot more hands-on, and I had to pay for it out of pocket. So when you're paying for something out of
Yeah.
pocket, you're gonna make sure you're getting straight A's, right?
Yeah,
So that helped
absolutely.
me to take education a little bit more serious by seeing like it's not just a handout, it's not guaranteed. Now, fast forward X amount of years later, like I've been able to get that same school that denied me. I got 3 degrees from there, and I was able to teach there for
Wow.
like 5 years. So it's really about like making sure that you take those setbacks or those perceived setbacks and apply it, and hopefully it just serves as fuel to kind of motivate you, as you go forward. Like, a lot of people tend to think that when you get to a certain level, that the road was just paved, and it was easy, and that there were no setbacks. They think that the process is completely linear. But for a lot of people, you take one step forward, you take 2 steps back, and that's the journey. So I'm sure you had some setbacks as well on your journey to become a realtor.
Yeah, most times, like when you think about like a realtor or a lawyer, right? You always think that those people are just like the one in a million that can do the job, right? But for me, man, it took a lot of late hours. It wasn't easy at all. I failed the real estate test my first time.
Mm,
I was devastated. But it's about what do you do when you fail? Do you take that L or do you take that lesson, right? You talk about that
right.
all the time. And for me, it was just about, okay, well, yeah, I failed it, but is this going to define me? And for me, I never take failure lightly. I always say, okay, look, what am I going to do now? And I just start studying more, putting in extra man hours and late nights, early mornings. I mean, any free time that I had, I was studying and I was able to pass. So I think those things right there kind of define the person that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
you just reminded me of like this quote that it says like, and I think it's from As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Circumstances don't define a man, it reveals himself to him. So like those circumstances, those same things that you talked about, getting that failing that test, and like for me, even getting that rejection letter from Western, it's easy to take that and say, you know what, I guess it wasn't meant to be. But I think, you need to go ahead and take those, like you said, those, I don't want to say failures because you learning from them, but you take, those circumstances and flip them so that you're able to see the positive in it. Right. So now that you failed it, now I need to study harder. Now that I got denied, okay, now I'm about to work twice as hard to get there, just to prove my worth, not to them, but to prove my worth to myself.
I mean, for me, the path to where I'm at now has never been straight or just straightforward. I mean, I went to school, I got my bachelor's in finance, but it ultimately led me back to my entrepreneurship. There's been bumps, bruises, and roadblocks along the way. But that's just a part of the journey. And a lot of people don't know. They always see the finished product, but they don't understand the path that, you had to go through to kind of get to where it is that you are today. I mean, What about you? Has that road been, straightforward? Has it been like easy?
No, of course not. Life always happens and adversity always arises, I think it was a little bit more consistent once I actually started school. So as I mentioned, I started school at 21, and I started at that community college, and then I went straight from there and went to Western to get my bachelor's. And then I went straight from there and continued and got my master's degree. But there was like a 3 or 4 year gap between getting my master's and then also getting my starting the process to get my doctorate. But during that time I was teaching, and then once again that was needed for me to get that experience and realize that this is something that I want to spend majority of, or the rest of my life doing. And I figured once I decided that, then now it's time to make sure I got the credentials to make sure that I can stay in this field for as long as I possibly can, which once again kind of pushed me to go for that doctorate degree. But the road's never easy. I mean, we all know life happens. We both got kids and, both married and things like that. So there's always some external, circumstances or obstacles that can arise that can deter you off of that path. But I think the most important thing is, there's certain things, keys, I would say, that kind of keep us on the path, to success. So, what has been a key to get to where you are, or what would you say is like one of the keys to success?
I would say for me, it's about putting in the hours. I think people ultimately underestimate the value in putting in hours, right? And those hours are late nights sometimes, early mornings, free time, sacrificing, the time with your kids sometimes, So, I mean, it's all about putting in those hours, right? For me, especially like I'll give you an example, like when I was studying for my real estate test, I was putting in so many hours. I was putting in, 9-10 hours a day, just studying and making sure, I could pass the test. And even now I put in extra amount of hours, just perfecting my craft. I might be on a YouTube video. I might listen to a podcast. I might, call up a mentor, but it's about putting in those hours to perfect what it is that you're trying to do. So, I mean, if that was one thing that I can tell somebody, it'll be make sure you put in the time to perfect whatever it is that you're trying to do.
I think a lot of people believe that you can cheat the process sometimes, One of my good friends, he posted this quote, right. He posted this quote onto Facebook, and he said that, and I think he got it from a basketball player, I don't know. But he said, like, if you want to look good in front of thousands, you have to outwork thousands in front of nobody. And that's
Mm.
all, what you talk about, like putting in the hours, that's what that's all about. I remember, and when I was, studying for in my doctoral program,
Hmm.
I remember I was wrapping up studying in my office on campus at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking out to my car, and as I'm walking out to the car in the parking lot, it's the only car in there. And for me, I took a picture of it, and that was my wallpaper for like a year on my computer, just to say like, you got to put those hours in. And this is what it looks
Yeah,
like. It's when you working when nobody else is working. So
absolutely.
when I think of like some of those keys to being successful, I think also, yeah, I mean, you got to be willing to make sacrifices. And you kind of touched on it.
Yeah,
That's time that you're sacrificing with your friends. That's time you're sacrificing with your spouse, your kids. But it's all towards, you got to make sure that, it's not in vain.
yeah,
Those hours that you're taking away from your family and your friends, you're putting it to something that's going to eventually elevate you in the long run. And like for me, I can pinpoint the exact moment when I knew that my mindset had kind of shifted, and
mm,
I started to take my education very seriously. And it was like my first semester when I was at college, at the community college I was attending, and it's my first semester there, and I'm in this calculus class, and I didn't have the book. So
mm.
I didn't want to call my mom and ask, or my parents and ask them for money so I could get this book. So I was like, man, what can I do to get the money for this book? And I had just bought some Jordans like, 2 months prior. And I was like,
Right.
let me go ahead and sell these shoes to pay for these college
Yeah.
textbooks. And that's what I ended up doing. And for me, like I said, that was a very defining moment because my mentality shifted from things now to things that are to come in the future. So I think that that's important to, be willing to make those sacrifices in the short term for long-term gain.
And you made a great point, John, in regards to sacrifices. But outside of sacrificing, what would be some advice that you can give to our listeners that may be thinking about, pursuing a PhD degree?
Well, and pursuing like the doctoral degree or even like in teaching, like I think the most important thing to have is mentorship. My department that I was teaching at has some great professors who are willing to share like, their knowledge and their guidance and their experiences with me to set me up for success rather than to just, throw me to the wolves, no pun intended to you, Glenn, but set me up
Yeah,
set me up for success, right? And even
yeah,
like in my doctoral program, when I started the program, I had so many people around me, that were able to push me, let me know what to expect. Because a lot of time managing your expectations is huge. Finding and seeking out mentorship, people who are in that position that you're aspiring to that can let you know the real, behind it. And I feel like that was probably the most important thing that I had was somebody to help guide me, through both teaching and even through my dissertation process. I will say, like, I know a lot of people are entrepreneurial, but they aren't necessarily entrepreneurs. So for people who have like those good ideas and is just looking for a way to kind of bring those ideas to fruition, what would be some
hmm.
advice that you would have, for people?
I would say, man, the biggest thing, especially like in this entrepreneurial type of pathway, is to network, right? I think that's the biggest thing that you can do. At least for me in my profession, like networking has been one of the strongest things that helped me, close some of the biggest transactions in my career, right? Anything that you can do to network, right? And I'll kind of take it back to real estate, for example. Join your local real estate investment, meetups if you can. Like for me, I go to a lot of meetups, just networking with people, have coffee with them. Network on Facebook groups if you can, with people that's doing the exact same thing that you're doing, or try to get a mentor, like you mentioned earlier. But networking with anybody that you can, I think oftentimes we think that we have to do everything ourselves, and that's not oftentimes the case. When it comes to being an entrepreneur, especially starting out, you want to be able to expand your network, right? And it goes back to the old quote where it says your network is your net worth, right?
Hmm.
So having someone on your team or someone at your disposal to help guide you down that path is one of the biggest investments that you can kind of make in your career.
And I think that's really good advice, because that's the same thing that I talk to my students about. While they're in those formidable years, like freshmen, sophomores, even juniors, like I tell them, to get out there and network, join social organizations, get involved on campus, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you can attest to this, it's not about what you know, but who you know. So yeah, as you said, Glenn, networking is huge, and I think that applies to entrepreneurs and even people that are working that traditional 9 to 5. It's definitely still important that they network as well to advance their careers. Now, just to wrap this episode up, because we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background information on Glenn and I, but what I'm really excited about, and I'm sure you are as well, Glenn, are all the guests that we're going to have on this podcast. Through our networking, we've been able to cultivate relationships with a lot of heavy hitters in a ton of different industries that are going to be coming on and sharing their wealth of knowledge. And I'm really excited to see what they got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for watching and listening to us today. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And for our YouTube subscribers out there, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the video.
Right. And once again, I just thank you guys for listening and watching this. I'm Dr. John Deverell. This is Glenn Curry, and this has been the Wolf and the Doctor podcast.